This is a triple crossover edition with Sit Down News and Mob Talk Sitdown. I'm talking John Panisi, Dave Schratwieser, and Scott Bernstein from the OG podcast getting together to deep dive some breaking news that's really quite surreal with what happened at a Long Island funeral home just a couple days ago. There was a internal dispute in the Bonanno crime family that erupted into a brawl at the funeral of Vito Grimaldi, who was an old school Bonanno soldier, and I believe he became a capo before he got demoted and was put on the shelf. But this was something that's been brewing now for 4 or 5 years, and a dispute between the current boss of the Bonanno crime family, Michael, or alleged current boss of the Bonanno crime family, Mikey Nose Mancuso, and his former acting boss, Joe C. Camerano. And it got violent, and it's all over the New York newspapers right now. Gangland News broke it, and then everyone else have had a field day. And we're going to get into it, jump into the deep end of the pool. Dave's out in Philly. He's taking the temperature out there. John Panisi, one of the really the foremost experts on modern day mafia activity, because he was right in the thick of it until recently when he was a made member of the Lucchese crime family. But John knows Joe C. and interacted with a lot of Bonannos in his time on the streets. Why don't we first break down exactly what happened for, let's say, 30 seconds, and then we'll throw it to Mr. Panisi and Mr. Schratwieser. So Mikey Nose Mancuso goes to prison and turns over the family on an acting basis to Joe Camerano. At some point, I believe around 2017, Joe Camerano decides to pull the capos in the Bonanno crime family if they want to keep Mikey Nose as the boss. Mikey Nose takes this as an affront, and when he comes out of prison, he demotes Joe C. And Joe C. was persona non grata and was told not to show up at his own father-in-law's funeral wake, which happened this past weekend. Vito Grimaldi, Joe C. is married to Vito's daughter, and was sent word by the administration of the Bonannos, Mikey Nose and his main lieutenants, to not show up at the funeral. Joe C. disregarded that and showed up with a group of bikers for protection. And when he went to go pay his respects to his father-in-law in the coffin, he was attacked by 3 made members of the Bonanno crime family, including a capo, Johnny Mulberry. And then the bikers that had been brought to watch his back stormed into the funeral home, and an all-out melee occurred. And at the end of the day, according to the reports, the Bonanno soldiers and capo were the ones on the ground, had gotten the worst of it, were bloodied, battered. And right now, I guess the ball's in Mikey Nose Mancuso's court with how he's going to respond to that. There's a lot of people worrying that there will be an uptick in violence in response to this. John, where are we? Where do we stand right now?
Well, first I just want to tell you that Mikey Nose not only shelved Joe C., Joe Camerano, Mikey Nose shelved John Porky Zancocchio, who was the consigliere. He shelved Vito Grimaldi, who was a captain in the family, and he shelved Vito's son Joseph, which was an acting captain. He took out a whole crew.
When you were on the street, what was Mikey Nose's reputation? For people that are familiar with the New York mob, Mikey Nose traces his roots all the way back to the Purple Gang, the New York Purple Gang of the late 70s, and was a guy that I think was thought of as future boss material. But this behavior kind of, in some ways, is, you could argue, is unbefitting of a boss.
Yeah. Well, as you know, our family, in particular, Matty Madonna, the acting boss of our family, disliked Mikey Nose. All this came to a head when the Bonannos entered the club in the Bronx that day. A lot of people know about that incident. So there was no love for Mikey Nose as far as the Lucchese's went.
Dave, what are you hearing on your end in Philly, New Jersey? You taking the pulse of what the guys are saying around there?
Yeah, I talked to a couple guys this morning just about this particular incident and asked if anything like this ever happened in Philly. I didn't recall anything like this happening, especially a beat down in a funeral home by one or both sides there. But guys mentioned two particular things to me: Salvi Testa's funeral and Pat the Cat Spirito's funeral. Apparently, Nicky Scarfo, who was the boss then of the Bruno Scarfo crime family, ordered everyone to stay away from the funeral, and they did. That's generally what everybody's saying, that if a boss or anybody else high-ranking underboss tells you to stay away from something, you stay away. All of them were kind of shocked that something would happen right there at the funeral home. Most guys said to me, I talked to three different people. Most guys said to me, we'd probably deal with this afterward, or the word would get back to, in this case, with Salvi Testa or Pat the Cat Spirito, word would have got back to Nicky Scarfo Sr., who we all know, was a bloodthirsty guy and probably would have exacted some type of retribution for that kind of situation. So it's all about respect. In a situation like this, I saw Mancuso's lawyer firmly denying that he ordered anything like this to happen. We should probably put that out there. So
Yeah,
we'll throw in a bunch. We'll throw in a bunch of allegedlys to cover that. But let's be clear. This is kind of outrageous. I mean, I'm a New York guy. I'm from Long Island. I know where that funeral home is, and I got to be honest with you. This is outrageous. It's ridiculous. I mean, to take something out on a guy that you have a beef with at his own father-in-law's funeral in front of his family and his people, I mean, that's just ridiculous. I mean, I don't get it. And as far as what he's going to do next with the biker group that allegedly put the beat down on the three made members, what are you going to do? You're going to go look for these guys now with a bunch of mob guys and you're going to tune these guys up, or you're going to do something like that? We should get into that later. There was some comments from an FBI agent that I firmly agree with. Let's see what the retribution is, if there's any.
I think that the main points are, A, the fact that Joe C. was shelved, his father-in-law was shelved. And I was mentioning it to Dave earlier, and I just want to say that a lot of people throw this word shelved around like it's insignificant. Let me tell you the significance, and I know you guys know, but for the people who don't know, I'm going to explain the significance of that word shelved. That word shelved means we would kill you, but we're not, so we're going to shelf you. Be lucky that you're alive. So a lot of people, they think that word is just like like they put on pause for being a mobster. You're excommunicated at that point, right? So with that being said, being that Vito was the deceased, was excommunicated, as well as Joe C., it's no longer Mikey Nose's business who goes to Vito's funeral or not, specifically his son-in-law, right? Here's a guy that was in that life, and let me just state for the record, my dealings with Joe, I call him Joe Saunders Jr. or Joe C., he was a gentleman, 100% a gentleman in that life. And so was John Porky. They were two guys that I respected. They carried themselves like gentlemen at all times. Every time I dealt with him, respect dripped off of him. That's how respectful he was. So knowing his character, the guy's going to his father-in-law's funeral, right? And a lot of people, and I think you guys know, I do not in any way glorify this life. I kind of strip away that curtain of glorification and show the life for what it really is, right? This story only proves me right because you attacked the guy, allegedly, right? They sent a message for these guys, and we can't say allegedly because they were there in the funeral parlor. and were ordered to attack this guy if he showed up. When they attack him, his wife is there. I believe Vito's wife is still alive, which would mean his mother-in-law is there. Their entire family and friends are there. You did this in front of family, which is a no-no. That's a cosa nostra no-no. You don't do things like that. And it just goes to show you, this is where the mob is today. This is the mentality of the people in the mob today, of what they lowered themselves to be. And people will debate me and say, oh, he says that there's no loyalty and there's no honor and there's no respect. Well, I want somebody to tell me, where's the loyalty, where's the honor, and where's the respect of what that incident represents?
And it's, I got to say this, John, I agree with what you're saying. It's so narrow-minded. If in fact he did order this, you're looking at a beef with somebody kind of circumventing the funeral of his father-in-law and their family. I mean, you're so focused on how pissed off you are at a guy, if in fact he did order this. You're so pissed off at him that you don't see the ramifications from this. You don't see how this makes your family look, your crime family look, that your guys would show up and do this, ordered or not ordered. If your guys did it, same thing here. Funeral stuff, you go to a family member's funeral, that stuff stays outside, or you just don't go, right? You're not taking this out in there. And then, in my mind, look what you just did to the Bonanno crime family. They're all over the headlines everywhere. I mean, this story's getting legs all over the place. You just embarrassed your entire family here. And what are you going to do about it now? You're left in a bad spot.
Well, now they have egg, as they say, like now you got egg on your face, and you're in a position where there's if you act, you know, law enforcement knows who's behind it, right? And B, if you don't act, where's the respect that other families are going to look at your family for letting your guys, you sent your guy, allegedly, right? But they were there. And now they got their ass kicked.
Can I jump in for a sec?
Yeah.
I want to.
Sure, show, man. You can jump in anytime you want. This is like the WWE of mob podcasters, for crying out loud. Jump in.
Some context here.
Yeah.
When you think about where this came from and what family that all this drama is emanating from, it's really not surprising. I mean, dating back to the 1960s with Joe Bonanno and the Bonanno War, the Bonanno crime family has been dysfunction junction in relation to the other 4 or 5 families. Not to say that the Colombos and Lucchese's and Genovese and Gambinos haven't had issues, but not to the degree that the Bonannos have. So the fact that there's this dysfunction being revealed again to the masses is not necessarily shocking in that respect. And it should be noted that Joe C is known as Little Joe Saunders because of his dad was the original Joe Saunders, who was an underboss. I mean, very, very highly respected organized crime figure, not just within the Bonannos, but across New York City and beyond. So, Joe C was someone that was brought up in the life, knew the life. As John's saying, this wasn't a guy that was known as a knuckle dragger or a miscreant. He was just like his father. He was respected and was a gentleman in that world. And then a lot of these articles that have been written are alluding to the fact that Mikey Knows either is or at least is coming off as incredibly insecure in his leadership role. And some of this can be linked back, I think, 2 years ago to his shelving of Porky which resulted from Mikey Knows, I think, was in prison at the time. And at Porky's trial, Porky's attorney is making the argument that you can't dub Porky the Consigliere because there's been so many reports of so many different consiglieres within the Bonanno crime family, so you can't take at face value this one report that Porky was. In the word coming out of prison was Mikey Knows was offended by that because it made him look indecisive as a leader for cycling through so many consiglieres.
So is the West Side, the Genovese family, indecisive?
Porky gets, I believe Porky got off on that case.
He did, yeah.
So if anything, there should be congratulations sent to him. But instead, he's demoted because of a defense that his attorney used in court. So that kind of, I think, foreshadowed what's going on here.
Well, he also was very close to Joe C too. So like this was an attack on that. I don't want to use the word faction, but I'm gonna on that faction because there was a split. And I remember when Joe had the position and Porky, there were certain members of the Bonannos that was split with the Anthony Rabito faction. There was another faction there.
Who was in that same trial with Porky?
Anthony Rabito was a couple
goes back decades.
Yeah. So you had a split in the Bonanno. So there were two factions, and obviously Porky was with the Joe C faction. But just to give a little more background on Joe, I was dealing with Joe through Johnny Sideburns, and that's how I met Joe and was introduced to him. And there was a sit down going on, and Joe at one time showed up at the sit down. And I will never forget, we were in my family's restaurant in Queens, and he gave me a little nod. So I followed him, and we sat outside, and he said, "Come on, me and you will sit out here." He says, "Let them hash that out." He says, he didn't want to be sitting there in his position, which he was right, because it wasn't fair. And he wanted somebody to talk to, so he got me out there. And, he was talking about different things and telling me a lot of things. And I respected him right from the start at just how well-versed and how much knowledge he had in that life, how he carried himself as a person. My captain at the time, Big John, right, Castellucci, had not met him yet, right? And when he met him, he told me, he says, "Boy," he says, "I knew this guy. He used to go to the Harley shops because Joe was into bikes and so was Big John." He says, "I had no idea who he is at all. Meanwhile, the guy is an acting boss in a Harley shop, just, looking around, and John would see him, had no idea who Joe was, which is the way it's supposed to be, right?" And that's just how well-schooled he was from his father. That's what kind of guy he was. He was a gentleman, definitely made for that life, definitely made for a boss's position, and would never do what took place here, would never do that.
His older brother, Dino, is in a biker group. It's not considered a 1% gang. This group that was at the funeral home and engaged in these fisticuffs are not considered by law enforcement a 1% gang. So they aren't no Hell's Angels or Pagans or the Outlaws. But Dino, who was a year older than Joe, I believe Dino's 63 and Joe's 62, is a member of that group. So it makes sense that Joe, who's also an aficionado, would be, hanging out in Harley shops.
Yeah, his brother. And, obviously, are people going to come out of respect when your father dies to the wake? Absolutely. Were they put on notice that there may be a problem? Absolutely. Joe's not a stupid guy either, and he obviously received some kind of message that he was not permitted to go to this wake. he wasn't gonna listen to this message. First of all, he's excommunicated. I mean, this is his father's way. It's not like he's going to another member's family, another member in the family's wake. You know what I mean? Then they could tell him, you're not
inactive member.
Yeah, in other words, now they could tell him, listen, you're not welcome here. Right? He would know.
And somebody probably be at the door and tell him that if he tried to come in, right?
He would know.
Or in the parking lot. Hey, dude, you're not welcome here today, right?
Joe's been in a life long enough to know I'm not going to go to that wake. Know where you're welcome and where you're not. You know what to do.
That's what happened in Philly at the two in Philly. Just that the order came down from Nicky Scarfer that no one was to go to those 2 funerals, and guys did not go. Period.
And I told you earlier that those kind of messages or notices that are sent out and word is spread around are one of 2 things. It's either I want everyone to stay away or I want everyone to show up. It goes both ways, those messages for wakes. We want to, like there were certain wakes, we want to make sure everybody's there. And then back to what Scott mentioned, this family, let's not forget what they did years ago. They crewed up and bum rushed, as the kids like to use that word, bum rushed our social club. And they were very, very lucky that certain guys were not in attendance that day, because that would have went south quickly. They had the administration and Big John there. And I could tell you that many, many guys in our family have spoken badly about Big John Castellucci for not taking a different kind of stance when they did that. In his defense, what was he doing? He had his administration there, our administration there, and I guess he was going by their reaction. You know what I mean? Because one thing could set something off in that situation. But
John, give the audience some background to that. What led to that dispute where you had a Bonanno crew invade a Lucchese social club and looking for some type of altercation?
So the main reason was that there was a conversation that involved Matty Madonna, and actually, I believe one of the guys that were in the funeral parlor was this Johnny Joe Spirito Jr. People don't know who that is. At one time, his father is a high-ranking member with the Bonannos. At one time, this is a guy, and I'll use the term kid, who actually made himself the underboss of that family. Went up on a visit, came back and told everybody that his father made him the underboss of the family, and wind up straightening out, which means inducted about 20-something of his friends. There was no names that went around. There was a whole big controversy that went on. They actually wind up shelving him, the Joe C faction. They actually wind up shelving him when this all came out and giving us the names of these guys, and then he was reinstated. He was actually brought back. But supposedly he was the guy who Matty Madonna made a statement and said, we don't recognize bosses that are incarcerated, which is not the smartest statement to make, coming from a family whose boss was incarcerated, because Mitchell is incarcerated. So it was a bad statement to make. There was a lot more behind that. I never went into this before. I think I told one of you guys. What had happened is there was a woman, of all the times and of all the things that go on in a mob, even for myself, a lot of times a woman is behind it. So there was a woman behind it who was actually once married to a Lucchese captain, a current captain in the Lucchese family, right? They're divorced. She started dating Mikey Nose. When Mikey Nose went to prison, she started dating Michael Melnish. And that's what the Michael Melnish beating that took place outside of Rayo's was over the woman. Well, a Lucchese associate, and I'll say his name, Joey Cupcakes Urgitano, starts dating this woman also I don't know the time frame. Was it during the Michael Melnish or after? But he starts dating her. She shows him a letter from Mikey Knows sent to her from in prison. He sent her this letter. And in the letter, he's discussing street business, which is a no-no with the woman. This Cupcakes allegedly takes this letter and says, let me have this letter. He gives it to Maddie. Maddie goes on a campaign to try to get the Bonanno family to take Mikey Knows down as the boss as a result of this letter. And during this discussion, he makes the statement that we don't recognize this guy, that he's incarcerated as a boss. And like I said, it was not a great statement to make.
No.
As a result of that, they take affront to that message and they decide to crew up during the planning of let's get together and let's go storm the Lucchese Club in the Bronx. Anthony Rubito, who is an old timer, had a position, is involved. They know Anthony Rubito is not going to storm the club. Anthony Rubito is going to go in there and try and be diplomatic, which they should have did this in another way. They should have set up a meeting with Maddie or Stevie or Joe DiNapoli or somebody, a captain, somebody, and set up a meeting and had a sit down over this alleged statement and that they felt insulted. Another guy, this Ernie Aiello, who's also involved, but look at the people who were involved in this incident at the funeral party. You're going to hear their names pop up, right? He was one of the instigators. Right? He was one of the instigators in this let's go charge the Lucchese Club. They knew, you know what? Nobody pick up Anthony Rubito. Anthony Rubito was left on a corner waiting to get picked up. They never picked him up. And I noticed because Johnny Sideburns was very close friends with Anthony Rubito. Anthony Rubito said they were supposed to pick me up. They left me standing on the corner. Why did they leave me standing on the corner? They didn't want diplomacy. They wanted to go like street punks because you have to understand, these are members of the Bonanno family. You are part of Cosa Nostra. What are you doing acting like street punks, like a gang? This is not a gang. We're not, I say we, I'm no longer in life, but when I was in life, we weren't a gang. We were supposed to be people that walked and carried ourselves with honor. Supposed to, right? That's why they left Anthony Rubito on the corner and they go into the club and with pistols, some of these guys had pistols in their waistband. And, that whole thing could have went sideways very quickly had other guys been there that day. They were very lucky that it didn't. And I think everybody was, because it would have, there would have been people at the very least that got hurt, or people would have got killed that day.
John, I'm interested, back to the wake and the fight there. How should this have been handled? You talked about diplomacy before. Should somebody sort of high ranking have gone to see Joe C and said, hey, look, Mikey's not happy about this. He doesn't want you to go. He doesn't want to do anything here. But if you go, there could be ramifications afterward. What's the proper, if there is a proper way in the mob, what is the proper, by the rules, way this probably should have been handled?
So
more diplomatically?
Yeah. So I don't want to take away, just in case they did reach out and send him a message. They might have done that. They might have sent him a message.
I'm pretty sure they did.
They might, yeah.
There was a message sent to him the week before. It wasn't done the way that Dave just explained it, or John would have, yes, I think, done it. But I think there was a message sent, and then he sent message back saying, I'm not listening to what you're telling me to do.
Yeah, I mean,
but that's my point. My point here is, yes, John, there's a way to handle this, and then there's a way not to handle this. This is how would you handle it in that position?
So, first of all, is if I was in the position I have to take into consideration that it's the guy's father. So
Right.
that's that guy's father-in-law, sorry. This guy's father-in-law, this is his family. It's not like he's going to somebody else's wake, you know, then we could enforce it. This is his family. His wife is going, his kids are going. It's their grandfather. This is about respect now, right? There's two kinds of respect. There's respect in that life, but we have to respect somebody's family as well, right? So that's first and foremost. Second, let's say Joe C was sent a proper message like, hey, we don't want you to attend this week, right? And Joe C sends a message back, I'm going anyway. I'm not listening to you, right? And he goes. And we sent somebody there just to see if he was gonna not listen to what we had to say. I would definitely instruct whoever it is that's going, don't you dare do anything at that wake. Don't you put your hands on him. Don't you cause a scene. Don't do anything at that wake. Let him know that you were there. Let him see you, and then leave and come back and let us know that we're there. And at
Report
that,
back, right, John? You report back,
report back.
but you don't do anything.
No. And then at that point, now we will deal with Joe C after the wake is over on our terms, because that is what's called Cosa Nostra. This is called street punk moves. Disrespectful. There is no honor in that whatsoever. And you don't do things like that. And to be honest with you, when I heard about it, when I seen what family was involved, it didn't surprise me not one bit, because of their past history. You know, you have to go by past history sometimes with things, and they have a bad track record, as Scott mentioned.
And I mean,
John,
if the life is about honor and respect, John, and it's been like that for decades, right? If it's about that, how do you take out the eraser and wipe off the board and wipe that completely away and do something like this? I mean, there's no honor, there's no respect. In fact, it goes 1,000% in the wrong direction.
Yeah. But I think that not only will the 4 other families in New York be looking down at this, because it makes, you gotta remember something, and maybe people don't get it. When an associate does something, it's a reflection on whoever he's with, and that's a reflection on the Bagada. But when any member of that life does something, it's a reflection on Cosa Nostra as a whole. And it makes everyone look bad, everybody. So it makes them look bad. But the public now, the public's eyes are opening up and saying, you know, look at these guys. Look at what they did. They attacked a 60-something-year-old man in front of his wife, in front of his kids, in front of, I believe, his mother-in-law and their whole entire family. Do you know what these Italian wakes are like? People are coming from Italy. People are coming from different states to come to these wakes, right? And in front of the public. You have people that are friends of the family. This is the public that were there. You don't do things like that in that life, but yet they do.
let's shift gears and talk about the fallout, and from that discuss the fact that the old way of doing things, the fact that there really isn't the mob hit parade in any city like there was in the 20th century. I've been on a few podcasts recently, talking about famous mob hits and where we exist today in the mafia in 2022, and just look at the numbers between the 20 years between '02 and '22. There's been maybe 10, 11, 12 mob hits around the country. And in the years between 1982 and 2002, there might have been 1,000. So I mean, there's been quite the downturn, and it's believed that there's been an edict, not just in New York, but in Chicago, Detroit, Philadelphia, that mob murders are a thing of the past. We mentioned Michael Meldish in your story about that incident between the Lucchese's and the Bonannos. He was the last real significant mob hit in New York in 2013. His the people that ordered that have all been convicted and sent to prison. Dave, over in your neck of the woods, the last mob murder was in 2012.
Mm-hmm.
And in my neck of the woods here in Detroit, probably 2007. So it's been a while.
Yeah, if this is a graph, this is now, this is way back then. Like
right.
An uphill spike like you haven't seen before.
Well, I have something to share on that note. So I can't even tell you the amount of messages and DMs that I received from Instagram over this incident, but I'm going to just highlight one that has to do with this. A guy wrote me and said, John, 20 years ago, they would have killed this guy, Joe C. and those bikers, right? And my answer was, no, my friend, 20 years ago, that incident would have never took place. Nobody would have ever did anything like that. But you guys are correct. And I think that it was more about what riles the public, or the media rather, and law enforcement up more than a mob hit. Nothing, right?
It's not a moral and ethical decision. It's a business decision.
This is yes. So
no, it's I don't want to go to jail decision. That's what the decision is.
So that's really, if it's countrywide or just New York State or Philly, it's basically an organized crime thing where they're saying, well, finally they smartened up, because they never learn from history, except now with this they do. What does history show us? If we start leaving bodies laying around the street, they're going to come after us and wipe us out, and they're going to come down on us. So let's stop doing that. Let's start shelving these guys. And that's why, again, I bring up how that word has such magnitude. It's not an insignificant word. People throw it around like it's nothing. All the time they do it with me. And they don't realize that it's your bogata, your family, basically telling you, Joe Camerano, we would gladly kill you, but because of what's going on, we're going to shelf you. But we would gladly kill you. So be happy that this is what's going on. Otherwise, 20 years ago, we would have put you in the trunk. That's really what shelving is about.
Yeah. And I got to tell you, George, Anastasia, and I talked about this on the last Mob Talk Sit-Down video we did earlier in the month. Listen, in Philly, the mob guys are in their late 50s. Joey Merlino just turned 60, in their early 60s. They've all done 9, 10, 14. Some have done 20. Some have done more. Joe Massimino's still in jail. He's probably done half his life in prison. Some of the Scarfo guys some of the Scarfo guys, 25 to 30 years in jail, 28, 27, 26. Those guys do not want to go back to jail. I have heard down here that there is an edict from New York, from the 5 families, that they don't want bodies left on the street anymore, because there's so much intermingling of business in terms of making money between families and groups and crews and things like that. What reflects on one reflects on all. John, you talk about this a lot when you and I have conversations. If one group does one thing, that just brings bad light and heat and the feds on top of everyone. Not just one group, not just your little wing of the family or whatever. everybody gets embarrassed. Everybody, then your business and whatever tape or whatever cooperator they have who was wearing a wire, that stuff then gets played out in a courtroom, in a public courtroom, in a federal courthouse, covered by reporters. Very rarely now, I will say that about the media covering those kind of things, but that gets played out, and that's no good for anybody. It's not good for business. It's not good for making money. It's not good for anything. And John, it goes right at what you always talk about: the honor, the loyalty, the respect. That all blows up when you do that. That's why there hasn't been any murder. I know Scott wanted to talk about the last 20 years. Let's talk about the last 10. In New York and Philly, there's been 2 murders. 2. And I'm not even sure yet at this point, Scott, you've done some research on this too, that the Gino DiPietro murder in 2012.
We're not positive.
We're not sure that was a mob hit. There were allegedly 2 mob guys involved.
It could have been an isolated incident.
Could have been a personal, right? John, you've heard stories about that murder. It could have been personal. Yeah.
Right.
So, and let's just, for people that don't get it, if a guy is in that life, and what I mean by that is he's an inducted member, and I'm just going to go around about. You guys know what I'm talking about. And he's, let's say, at a card game, and somebody gets disrespectful and says something disrespectful to the guy and insults him. And that guy takes it upon himself to maybe get somebody else, and together they go and they kill this guy, right? That's not a mob hit.
Right.
That's a personal vendetta. Like, that's a personal beef between a guy who happens to be a member of the mob, but you don't really look at that as, oh, that's a mob hit. Just because the guy's in a mob, that doesn't make it a mob hit, because he wasn't sent to do that. You know what I mean? He's taking it upon himself to do that. Maybe.
Yeah. And John, you well know, when you do something like that, you take care of your own personal business using yourself as a made guy and another made guy.
Yeah.
Right? That brings heat on you from your own family. Because hey, did you run this by somebody? Did you let people know? Did you touch base with your boss, your capo?
Yes.
Right? The lieutenant in charge of you, your street boss. I mean, did you touch base? You didn't touch base, and you did this. And now look at the heat on our family because you did.
I told you, I know I told you, I've said it before, that there was a time they sent us to, and at the time we didn't know who it was. You know, we know now. We were going to assault Stevie Creer's son-in-law. Again, I say at the time we didn't know who the intended victim was. And things got so crazy that at one point, and you know, I hate to say it, but I mean, this is my mind frame back then. I was in the life. I had told another member of our family, Anthony Guzzo, I said, you know what, get me a pistol. I'm just going to shoot into his car, and, you know, I'll hit him low. And I got reprimanded by my captain. Don't forget, I wasn't trying to go kill the guy, but I got reprimanded just for that. And what he said to me was, who F told you to go shoot anybody? We told you to go assault somebody. So that was me taking kind of matters into my own hands in that sense. Imagine taking matters into your own hands and killing a guy without running it past your captain. It could cause you a major problem.
We should mention that there actually has been 3 mob-related murders out of New York in the last couple years, but not of the significance of what the Mike Meldish hit was, who, by the way, Mike Meldish and Mikey Knows Mancuso both came up in the Purple Gang, the New York Purple Gang of the.
Mikey Meldish was his boss.
Right. But you know, in 2018, Sally Daz, who was an associate of a bunch of different crime families, got killed by his own kid.
Yeah, I don't consider that anything to do with the mob.
Right. Vincent Zito, another Lucchese loan shark.
I don't consider that another one, nothing to do with mob. This is, you got 2 incidents, right? Just because the people involved were on record with people or associated to a crew or a family, You have one incident where a son, I mean, as crazy as it is, gets the father killed with blood members for money. And
Yep.
you have a second incident for money again, where a best friend or a close friend kills and robs his friend. And to me, I don't personally consider those mob hits.
And then you had the boss of the Gambino crime family, Frankie Boy Cali, killed by a mentally disturbed friend of his niece's, which again, it has nothing to do with mob politics, but it was someone that was a mobster who was killed.
Yeah, and we know that he was and is a mentally disturbed young guy who thought in his mind that he was going to make a citizen's arrest,
Right.
And it went sour,
And we should also, this is a good segue or a good connect the dots here. We're talking about how the mob doesn't murder like it did in the past. This kid, I'm blanking on his name right now. It's been 3 years, and he's still standing. If this would have been at any other time, any other era in the New York Mafia, they would have killed this guy.
Look, I hope I'm wrong, because I've made this prediction, and I don't want to make predictions when somebody's life or anyone's life is at stake. But I was asked a long time ago what I thought about retaliation from the Sicilian faction. And my answer was, it's not if, it's when. The shooter is probably in the safest place, right? Because he's in prison and probably in protective custody somewhere, wherever he is. But he does have a mother, he does have a father, and he does have a brother. And, I would say that if anyone was going to pay a price, it would be the father or the brother. And it would be years from now. That they're known to sit and wait and wait and wait, and then act. I mean, I hope I'm wrong. I really do.
And listen, they may be waiting for this to all play out too in court. We don't know. I mean, this guy's been analyzed back and forth. He is a very good attorney, by the way, who has made their points in court, and he still remains where he is now. We 3.5 years since this happened, a little more.
Yeah.
And nothing's happened on either end, from the mob and or the justice system at this point. At this point, I think the kind of temporary ruling or standing ruling is that he was not of sound mind when this happened. So
his name's Anthony
Mello.
Comello.
Yeah, I looked him up.
Let me just state for the record, and I know this again, we're talking about a different era, but the fact that someone was mentally unstable, John Gotti's people killed someone because he took a shot at him in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Was a guy that was known as kind of a neighborhood crazy.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't take that into account when they decided to.
No, they didn't. You're right.
But it goes back to what you guys were saying earlier. What was the era that the guy that
That's
was
1987.
Okay.
This is
versus, yes. You see the difference?
Yeah.
The difference is that you had wise guys walking around strapped up, meaning with pistols back then, versus a boss that was heard a noise, come out of his house, seen there was a fender bender. And my theory of it is that, he was trying to, he's seen it was a young kid, meaning Frankie Cali seen a young kid backed up into his truck. He'll always get the truck fixed, no big deal. And I believe it's when he went to go walk away, the kid must have turned around and said something like, "You're under arrest," or something. "I'm putting you under arrest," or whatever. And that's maybe when he might have said something back to him and been a little firm with him, or maybe said, "Go F yourself," or something like that. And the kid pulls out and shoots him. But, you're right. Years ago, the same thing similar happened to John Gotti, and they dealt with it.
What do you think the difference in the situation if Joe Saunders, the original Joe Saunders, was still on the street? I mean, this would have never reached this point.
You talk about Joe Saunders, the father.
Joe C's dad. I mean,
He was the
does that play a role if he's here? Does
100%.
any of this happen in the last 4 or 5 years?
No way. Let's not forget the mentality of a Joe Saunders Senior, the father, and a Mikey Nose Mancuso. I mean, look at some of the incidents that went on. They say in that life, past performance goes a long way. Says a lot.
Yeah.
Look at Mikey Nose's past performance. And look at his past performance just as a boss, even from in prison.
Yeah, we should also point out who originally tapped Mikey Nose as acting boss. It was Vinny Gorgeous, who made Mikey Nose his acting. And where's Vinny Gorgeous right now? Vinny Gorgeous is in
prison for life.
for trying to put out hits on judges and prosecutors.
Yeah.
He was going on hits himself.
Right. And going on hits himself while he's a capo and acting boss.
But listen, hey, he still looks good, Scott, in prison.
Yeah, I saw
a recent picture of him the other day. Still looks good.
But it shows you that there's a long line of lunacy in the Bonanno boss's chair. In the Lucchese, we have Vic Amuso, who's been running that family from prison for 30 plus years, who until the old school boss in Philly, Nicky Scarfo, died a couple of years ago, was aligned with Scarfo in prison.
Yeah.
And you're talking about two lunatics there that were like-minded lunatics behind bars.
Who thought they could retake the Philly mob because Vic Amuso backed Nicky Scarfo Sr. Far from it.
Back to the story at hand. I just shake my head more and more the more I think about it. Not in disbelief, just that it was the fact that it was done. They would step that low to attempt to do something like that is just outrageous.
See, the three alleged Bonanno soldiers and capo that were there to enforce Mikey Nose's edict were Johnny Joe Jr., who we mentioned before, Ernie Aiello, who we mentioned before, and then Johnny Mulberry, who's the capo, was the highest ranking member there. And Johnny Mulberry, from my research, and tell me if I'm wrong, guys, I believe he was the one that was acting as a go-between for Mikey Nose when he was in prison, when Joe C. Jr. was trying to possibly bump Mikey Nose out of the boss's seat and pull the capos. It was Johnny Mulberry that was coming to deliver him the messages from Mikey Nose.
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, I could be wrong.
Let me
might have been Johnny Skyway.
Yeah, let me pull this apart for a second, John. Internally, now that this actually did happen, 3 guys went and took care of this at the funeral home in a very embarrassing, disrespectful, call it whatever you want to call it. What's the internal strife now in the Bonanno crime family? These 3 guys got the crap kicked out of them. Yeah. So not only did we go there to do what you wanted us to do, we got the shit kicked out of us. So what are you now going to do? His lawyer says he didn't order anything. Okay, let's say that's true. Whoever did order it, those 3 dudes. What are you going to do about this now? Dude, we went and did what you wanted us to do, and look what happened to us. Right? What's the internal strife there inside the Bonanno crime family?
Exactly what you just said. Those 3 guys out of everybody are going to put the most pressure for revenge because they were embarrassed. They were not only embarrassed, they got their ass handed to them. So that's where the pressure is going to come from. Scott mentioned earlier that, or was it you, Dave? Somebody mentioned Mikey Nose's insecurity, right?
Yeah.
Scott. You're dealing with an insecure boss, right? So do the 3 guys who got the bad end of that situation really have to poison an Insecure's boss's mind for revenge? No, because now, if he was insecure before this happened, how insecure is he now that he has egg all over his face? That, I'll use your words, allegedly he sent 3 of his guys to go handle something, and they got wiped out in a funeral parlor. You know what I
And
mean?
not
So-
associates. He didn't send,
no,
you know, he didn't farm out muscle. They weren't Albanians,
no.
or, you know, these were made
All
guys.
right, let's go another direction for a second. Let's go another direction for a second. This is all over the papers. It's all over the place. It's everywhere. People are talking about it. Mob guys are talking about it. What do you think the FBI is doing right now? You think they'd have trouble going to get a warrant right now to go up on a wire because of this? We have this massive internal strife in the Bonanno crime family. We have allegedly a boss ordering 3 made guys to go do this. And now we got to worry about retaliation. Your Honor, the public safety could be in danger here. Wouldn't you love to be an FBI agent in New York right now listening to this bullshit? If they're not already up on wires, John, right? If they're not already up on the wires, could you see them having a problem getting a wire? Permission to put up a wire on this? And what a conversation that would be hearing.
When incidents like this happen, they love it. Not that a 60-something-year-old man got attacked at a funeral, or that there was a brawl at a funeral. The fact that it took place, because it opens up so many doors. Do I think that they went to Joe C? Most definitely. I don't. Most likely he knows how to talk to them, and he's probably not going to say too much. But with that being said, I think that an incident like this opens up doors that the Bonanno family doesn't want to be open, because it could lead to disastrous, things happen inside that family, like indictments.
Listen, you want a list of witnesses? You want a list of witnesses? You've been to a wake before, right, John? What do you do when you go to a wake? You sign in, right? That you were there. You want a list of witnesses? Ask the subpoena the funeral home.
They're going to subpoena the funeral home. Do you know what else they're going to do? They're going to subpoena the
there's got to be video of it.
Surveillance cameras.
There's video of it
somewhere. They're gonna have all of that. They have all of that.
Did they not farm out this wake as well? This was held at a specific funeral home, but did I read properly that another funeral director handled it that was close with the family? I thought I read something about that as well.
Yeah, that happens.
Yeah, because they don't have a big enough venue or big enough facility to handle it, that kind of thing. But I could just see this like getting legs like no tomorrow. I would bet money FBI agents are working over the weekend this weekend, trying to get up on this and get ahead of this. A, to see if there's going to be retaliation. B, you must protect the public, because what if there's a drive-by shooting at a clubhouse or something like that in retaliation for this? Oh, this is a biker gang that likes to hang at a particular location. Let's go visit that location. You got to be worried about that, protecting the safety of the public.
Absolutely.
And in addition, you might hear all kinds of interesting things on a wire like that.
Yeah.
Rising tensions in a crime family are the quickest way to end up under indictment. I mean, really. I mean, look at all of the most famous internal squabbles within mob families around the country, and inevitably at the end of the road is every one of those guys that was involved are facing, the judge for it, and most likely going to prison.
Yeah. And the government, and particularly the FBI, have so many sources, that they know more about this story than anyone who wrote about it, Dave, probably even more than Joe C knows. They know more about it than anybody, because they have their sources in place, and they already know the whole story. They guaranteed they know the whole entire story, exactly what took place and what's going on afterwards.
And to your point, John, how do we know they didn't have somebody at the funeral to see? Maybe they heard about this beforehand. Maybe they're up on a wire and they hear about it, or they know about it, or somebody tells them about it, and I'm a member of the public. I knew the family, right? And I go in and, could have been anybody, and go in there and say, see what happens. Now you have your own witness right there. You don't know that.
If there was any agents, they would have put a stop to it. That's for sure, right? You have to.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering if they were surveilling that funeral. Because that's their thing. I mean, we all know that they surveil the funeral, right?
And let's be clear that this didn't. Again, I want to just emphasize for people that maybe haven't consumed the headlines or gone into the articles that hold those headlines. This didn't happen in the parking lot of the funeral home. This happened in front of the body.
Yes.
As Joe C. went to go pay his last respects to his father-in-law, he was attacked in front of the body, and this all happened in the middle of the funeral home.
Yeah, and to stress the fact again, in front of his wife, in front of his kids, in front of, I think, his mother-in-law and their entire family and their friends. I mean, that's like, not that it would make it any better if they did this outside, but it's that more worse that they did it inside.
It's an unmitigated PR disaster that, like you say, it's happening within the Bonanno crime family. This is an issue for Mikey Knows, but it's reflecting on everyone else in that life in New York City, and the heat comes with that attention and with that. It's a bad look. It's a bad look all around. It's a bad look for everybody, and all it does is bring attention to stuff that you're trying to keep attention away from.
Yeah, and I don't think you can rule out possible criminal charges here at some point too. If there was surveillance video, if there were cameras there, all that kind of thing. I mean, these are
you may see arrest. You may see get arrested over this.
And if they could prove that there was an order passed down to those three guys to go there, now you have a whole significant other direction by the feds, potentially.
That's racketeering.
Yeah.
And as far as the bikers go, right? So of course, the Bonanno family would love to know who exactly the bikers were. The only person that could tell them exactly who the bikers were is the brother of Joe, and he's not going to tell them.
No, no,
never going to give his friends up.
And they're the only ones who really look good here, even though I don't endorse beating other people. Having said that, they're the ones who come out of this looking good. They stood up for their guy.
That's what I mean.
In a really, really disrespectful event that took place.
And knowing what they were going up against too. Let's not forget. You think
putting their lives in danger by knowingly putting their hands on made guys.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, maybe that tells you a little bit about the mob and where they stand these days.
Where we are in 2022.
That allegedly independents had no problem stepping to them. Right.
I couldn't have said that any better myself.
There you go. I've been hanging around you guys a lot too much.
That's a good. I think that's a good. That's a good note to end on. If you guys are all right, this was fun. We've gone about it. All over an hour, and I think we've given the viewers great insight. John, I can't thank you enough. Dave, you're a living legend, a superstar.
Stop. I appreciate the invitation.
I nod to both of you guys for helping me do my job, and let's try to maybe do this again. This was fun.
No, absolutely. And I just want to say to both of you esteemed gentlemen that I highly respect the both of you. I think that, I've said it before, I've told other people, so I appreciate being on with both of you guys. So.
I appreciate you guys as well. Thanks for the invitation. I do.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, John. Thanks for checking in on this special edition of Breaking News Original Gangsters podcast. You're going to be able to check this out, audio and video. It's going to be on Dave's site. It's going to be on our site. It's going to be on John's, all of our social medias. So check it out in the coming days. Thank you very much. We'll see you next time. Scott Bernstein, OG Podcast, out.
You can subscribe to the Sit Down News blog at sitdownnews.com, and I appreciate everyone who has subscribed. Thank you. Well, just another example in the mob you never knew about. Hope you enjoyed the story, If you would like to subscribe to this channel, you could do so down below. If you would like to subscribe to my other channel, Unlimited Substance Podcast, I'll add a link in the description to this video.